The conference room fell silent as the proposal was read aloud. Princess Valara Koth sat perfectly still, her violet hands folded on the polished table before her. Around her, the Corvathian delegation shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Across from them, the human representatives maintained carefully neutral expressions. "A marriage," High Chancellor Vorin said slowly, his mental voice echoing with distaste, even as his physical voice remained steady. "Between our species." Admiral Kate Morgan, the human military leader, nodded. "A symbolic union, to show both our peoples that peace is possible, that we can build something together instead of tearing each other apart." Valara had expected many things from this final peace negotiation. Territorial concessions, trade agreements, prisoner exchanges, but not this. Marriage to a human. The very idea would have been laughable 6 months ago. Before the battle at Epsilon Ridge, where 10,000 Corvathian soldiers died. Before the human counterattack at New Harmony that left an entire colony world in ruins. Now, nothing seemed laughable anymore. Only necessary. "I will do it," Valara said quietly. Every head in the room turned toward her. Vorin's mental presence pressed against her mind, sharp with surprise and something close to alarm. The Empress, her mother, had given strict instructions that Valara observe only, not participate, certainly not volunteer. "Princess, this decision requires careful consideration," Vorin began. "We have been considering for 3 years," Valara interrupted, meeting his gaze. 3 years of war, 3 years of death. If my marriage can end it, then there is nothing to consider." Admiral Morgan studied her with those strange human eyes, brown and warm, and completely unreadable. Corvathians could sense the thoughts and emotions of every sentient species they had encountered. Every species except humans. The human mind was chaos, fragments of thought and feeling that never quite formed into coherent patterns. It was part of why the war had been so difficult. You could not predict an enemy you could not read. "We would need a volunteer from our side as well," Admiral Morgan said carefully. "This cannot be a one-sided arrangement." "We have candidates," said the man beside her, a human officer whose nameplate read Commander Stevens. "Military volunteers who understand what this means." The negotiations continued for hours. Valara listened as they discussed terms, protocols, living arrangements. She would be moved to a neutral station after the ceremony. Her husband, whoever he might be, would join her there. They would live as symbols of the peace, their union proof that Corvathians and humans could coexist. It was only later, in her private quarters aboard the Corvathian flagship, that Valara allowed herself to feel the weight of what she had done. She stood before the window, overlooking the stars, her reflection ghostly in the glass. What kind of man would volunteer for this? What kind of human would agree to marry an alien for politics? The answer came 3 days later. His name was Daniel Price. Lieutenant Commander Daniel Price, to be formal. He was 32 years old, a pilot and engineer from the outer colonies. His files said he had lost both parents when the Corvathians destroyed a human supply convoy early in the war. He had every reason to hate her people. Their first meeting was arranged in the same conference room where the treaty had been proposed. Valara arrived early, her ceremonial robes flowing behind her. She had dressed carefully, choosing colors that would not seem aggressive or weak. When the door opened and the human walked in, she was surprised by how ordinary he looked. Daniel Price was tall by human standards, with dark hair and darker eyes. He wore his military uniform cleanly, without ornament. He moved with quiet confidence, not the swagger she expected from a warrior. When he saw her, he stopped and offered a small bow. "Princess Valara," he said. His voice was low and even. "Lieutenant Commander Price," she replied, inclining her head. They sat across from each other at the table. Valara reached out with her telepathic senses, trying to get some measure of this man who would become her husband. She touched the edge of his mind and found nothing. Not the usual chaos of human thought, but something stranger. A quiet, empty space. Like touching a room with no furniture, no decoration, just silence. She withdrew, unsettled. "You volunteered for this," she said. It was not a question. "I did." "Why?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. "I am tired of fighting. If this has even a small chance of working, it is worth trying." "You lost your parents to my people." "Yes." His expression did not change. "And many Corvathians lost families to mine. At some point, someone has to choose to stop the cycle." Valara had prepared herself for anger, for resentment, perhaps for cold professionalism. She had not prepared for this calm acceptance. "You understand this is permanent. Our laws and yours both require the marriage to be binding." "I understand. You will be expected to live with me, appear with me, represent this peace to both our peoples." "I understand," he repeated. "And you believe you can do this? Live with someone from the species that killed your family?" For the first time, something shifted in Daniel's expression. Not anger, but something deeper. "I believe holding on to hate has cost us enough. I would rather try something different." The wedding ceremony took place 1 week later, aboard Haven's Rest, the neutral station that would become their home. Representatives from a dozen species attended. Media feeds broadcast to billions across both human and Corvathian space. Valara wore traditional Corvathian marriage robes, silver and violet, embedded with crystalline patterns that caught the light. Daniel wore his dress uniform, dark blue with gold accents. They stood before the assembled witnesses and spoke the words that would bind them. The Corvathian portion of the ceremony required a blood exchange, a symbolic sharing of life. Valara made a small cut on her palm with the ceremonial blade, violet blood welling up. She offered the blade to Daniel. Most humans flinched at this part. She had seen recordings of previous human-alien ceremonies, where the human participants had shown clear discomfort. Daniel took the blade without hesitation. He cut his own palm, red blood mixing with her violet, as they pressed their hands together. His grip was firm and steady. When she looked into his eyes, searching for fear or disgust, she found only that same calm acceptance. "By blood and by choice, we are bound," Valara spoke the ancient words. "By choice and by hope, we move forward," Daniel added the human addition that had been approved. When it was done, they were married. Princess Valara Koth and Lieutenant Commander Daniel Price, symbols of a peace that neither people truly believed in yet. They left the ceremony together, walking side by side toward their new quarters on Haven's Rest. Valara had expected this to feel like a prison sentence. Instead, as Daniel held the door open for her with simple courtesy, she felt something unexpected. Not hope, exactly. Not yet. But perhaps the possibility of hope. And in a galaxy torn by war, that was more than she had felt in years. Their new life together began in silence and uncertainty, but it began. Living with Daniel Price was nothing like Valara had imagined. She had prepared herself for conflict, for awkward silences, for the constant tension of sharing space with a stranger. What she had not prepared for was his simple kindness. Their quarters on Haven's Rest were designed to accommodate both species. 2 bedrooms, a shared living area, cooking facilities that could handle both Corvathian and human nutrition. Daniel had arrived first and taken the smaller bedroom without comment. When Valara mentioned this, he simply shrugged. "You are a princess. I am a soldier." It seemed appropriate. "We are supposed to be equals in this arrangement," Valara pointed out. "Then we are equals who made practical choices about bedroom size," Daniel replied, with the faintest hint of a smile. The first week passed in careful politeness. They shared meals when their schedules aligned. Daniel proved to be a surprisingly good cook, able to prepare human food that did not offend Valara's more sensitive Corvathian palate. They made small talk about station life, about the endless diplomatic functions they were required to attend. But Valara noticed things, small things that did not quite fit. Daniel would disappear for hours at a time, always to the station's engineering bay. When she asked about it, he explained that he liked to keep busy, that his training was in systems repair, and he enjoyed helping the station crew. She accepted this until the day she overheard two station engineers talking. That human Price, he fixed the plasma regulator in 40 minutes. It was supposed to take us 3 days. I heard he redesigned the entire air filtration system in Section 7. Made it 30% more efficient. What kind of pilot knows that much about station engineering? Valara filed this away, adding it to the growing list of questions about her husband. Then there was the telepathy issue. Every attempt she made to read Daniel's thoughts met with that same empty silence. She had never encountered anything like it. Even trying to sense his emotions, something that worked on most species, gave her nothing. He was a blank space in her telepathic awareness, present physically, but absent mentally. The first major diplomatic dinner took place 3 weeks after their arrival. Representatives from 7 species attended, all curious to see the symbolic couple up close. Valara wore formal robes and smiled until her face hurt. Daniel stood beside her in his uniform, fielding questions with polite brevity. Halfway through the evening, alarms began to sound. Not the sharp emergency klaxons, but the warning chimes that indicated a system failure. The lights flickered once, twice. Several guests looked around nervously. Life support failure in Section 12, a voice announced over the station communication system. All personnel evacuate that section immediately. Valara felt the ripple of concern through the telepathic species present. Section 12 housed the guest quarters for the Corvathian diplomatic staff. Her own people were in danger. Daniel set down his glass carefully. "Excuse me," he said quietly, and left the room. Valara started to follow, but Admiral Morgan caught her arm. "Give him a moment. My people are in that section. I know, so does he." 15 minutes later, the all-clear sounded. Section 12 was secure, life support restored. Daniel returned to the dinner as quietly as he had left, his uniform slightly smudged with something dark. He resumed his position beside Valara, without explanation. "What did you do?" she asked quietly. "The primary coupling was loose. I tightened it, and rerouted power from the secondary system." "You just fixed it?" "It was not complicated." But it was complicated. Valara knew enough about station engineering to know that diagnosing and repairing a life support failure in 15 minutes was not normal. The station's own engineers were still in the control room, looking baffled. That night, she tried again to read his mind. She sat across from them in their living area, pretending to review diplomatic reports, while she carefully, gently, reached out with her telepathic senses. Nothing. That same peaceful emptiness. "Is something wrong?" Daniel asked without looking up from his own reading. "No. Why do you ask?" "You keep staring at me." Valara felt heat rise in her cheeks, a Corvathian sign of embarrassment. "I am simply trying to understand you." Daniel set down his tablet. "What would you like to know? Why is your mind silent?" He was quiet for a long moment. "What do you mean?" "I am telepathic, Daniel. You know this. I can sense the thoughts and emotions of nearly every species in this galaxy. But when I try to sense you, there is nothing. Just silence." "Perhaps I have boring thoughts," he said, but there was something careful in his tone. "That is not how telepathy works. Even boring thoughts have a presence. You have none. Would you prefer I think louder?" There was a hint of humor in his voice now. "I would prefer honesty." The humor faded from Daniel's expression. I am being honest when I say I do not fully understand it myself. Humans are difficult for Korvathians to read. You have said this before. Difficult, yes. Impossible, no. You are impossible. Before Daniel could respond, Valara's communication device chimed. A message from her mother, the Empress. She read it quickly, her expression darkening. Trouble? Daniel asked. Always, Valara sighed. There are protests on the homeworld. Some of my people believe I have betrayed them by marrying a human. I am sorry. It is not your fault. Is it not? I am the human you married. Valara looked at him, really looked at him. He sat perfectly still, his expression neutral, but something in his eyes suggested he felt more than he showed. Do you regret this? She asked. No, he said immediately. Do you? I am not certain yet. She expected him to be hurt by this. Instead, he nodded as if she had said something perfectly reasonable. That is fair. We barely know each other. We are married, Valara pointed out, but marriage and knowledge are not the same thing. Over the following weeks, Valara found herself spending more time with Daniel. Not because the diplomatic schedule required it, but because she wanted to. He was easy to be around, never demanding attention, but always present when needed. He listened when she complained about her mother's constant messages. He made her laugh with dry observations about station politics. And always, that silence where his thoughts should be. Then came the night that changed everything. Valara could not sleep. She left her quarters and wandered to the station's observation deck. A large room with transparent walls that looked out at the stars. She was surprised to find Daniel already there, standing at the window. I did not mean to disturb you, she said. You are not disturbing me. I come here often when I cannot sleep, he replied. In the darkness, with only starlight illuminating them, it felt easier to talk. Why did you really volunteer for this marriage? She asked. Daniel was silent for so long, she thought he might not answer. Then he spoke, his voice quiet. Because I was tired of fighting, tired of hating, tired of watching people die for causes that seemed to matter less with each battle. When they announced the marriage proposal, I thought, perhaps this is a chance to choose something different, to be part of building instead of destroying. Even if it meant marrying someone from the species that killed your parents. My parents died in a war. Wars are not started by individual people. They are started by fear and misunderstanding and failures of diplomacy. You did not kill my parents. The war did. Valara felt something shift in her chest. You are wiser than you look, human. I will take that as a compliment, princess. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Then Valara's communication device chimed urgently. An alert from station security. What is it? Daniel asked. Intruder alert. Someone unauthorized in the diplomatic wing. They both turned to leave the observation deck. As they stepped into the corridor, Valara saw him. A Korvathian male, young, his mental signature burning with rage and fanaticism. He held a plasma weapon. Traitor! He screamed, aiming at Valara. What happened next took perhaps 2 seconds, but Valara's telepathic perception captured every detail. Daniel moved, not with normal human speed, but faster than should have been possible. He covered the distance between them and the attacker before the weapon could discharge, his hand closing around the Korvathian's wrist with precise force. The weapon clattered to the floor. Daniel swept the attacker's legs and brought him down, controlled but decisive. By the time station security arrived, the threat was neutralized. Later in their quarters, Valara confronted him. That was not possible, she said. What was not possible? Your speed, your reaction time. You moved before he could fire. That is not normal for humans. Daniel met her gaze steadily. Adrenaline can do remarkable things. Do not lie to me, Daniel. Please, not about this. I am not lying. I simply trained extensively. No amount of training accounts for what I saw. They stood facing each other, the air between them charged with tension. Valara realized she was breathing hard, not from fear but from something else. From the sudden understanding that she had been living with a mystery, and that mystery might be deeper than she had imagined. "Who are you, Daniel Price?" she asked quietly. "I am your husband," he said. "And I would never let anyone hurt you." It was not an answer to her question, but standing there, looking into those dark eyes that held secrets she could not read, Valara realized something that surprised her. She was beginning to care about those secrets, and about the man who kept them. 3 months into their marriage, everything fell apart. The news broke in the middle of the night. A human separatist group had bombed a Corvathian colony transport. 400 civilians dead, including children. The images flooding across every newsfeed were horrific. Valara watched them with growing horror, her hands shaking as she held her communication device. Daniel found her sitting on the floor of their living area, surrounded by holographic news reports, tears streaming down her violet face. "Valara," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "They were children," she whispered. "So many children. I know. I am so sorry. Your people did this." Daniel flinched but did not look away. "Some of my people. Not all of us. Not me. Does it matter? This is what we are. Corvathians and humans. We destroy each other. We always have." Within hours, the political fallout began. Hardliners on both sides called for the peace treaty to be dissolved. The marriage, they said, was a failed experiment. How could two species unite when extremists from both continued to kill? Valara's mother, the Empress, sent a direct order: return to the homeworld immediately. The marriage would be annulled. Valara was needed to help manage the crisis and prepare for the inevitable return to war. "I have to go," Valara told Daniel that evening. "My mother has commanded it." Daniel stood at the window, his back to her. "I understand." "That is all you have to say?" He turned to face her. "What would you like me to say?" "I do not know. Something. Anything. You are always so calm, so controlled. Do you feel nothing about this?" "I feel a great deal," Daniel said quietly. "I simply have practice not showing it." Valara felt frustration rising. 3 months of living with this man, and she still could not read him. Could not understand him. "You are a mystery to me, Daniel. Every time I think I am beginning to understand you, I realize I know nothing at all. Perhaps that is better. Perhaps not knowing makes it easier for you to leave." "I do not want it to be easy," Valara said, surprised by the truth of her own words. "I thought I would. I thought this marriage was just duty, just politics. But it has become more than that. You have become more than that." Something shifted in Daniel's expression. "Valara? No. Let me finish. I do not know what you are, Daniel Price. I do not know why your mind is silent to my telepathy. I do not know how you move faster than any human should. I do not know why you can solve engineering problems that baffle experts. But I know that you have been kind to me, patient with me, and I know that somewhere in the last 3 months, I started to care about you. Not as a political partner, but as a person." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "You should not care about me." "Why not?" "Because I have not been honest with you." Valara's breath caught. "Then be honest now." Daniel walked to the door and locked it. He engaged the privacy shields that would prevent any surveillance or eavesdropping. Then he returned to stand before her. "What I am about to tell you could restart the war," he said. "If the wrong people knew, everything would collapse. But you deserve the truth." "Tell me," Valara said. Daniel took a breath. "I am not entirely human. Not anymore." Valara waited, her heart pounding. 20 years ago, the human government started a program called Project Meridian. They were afraid of losing the war, afraid that humanity would be wiped out by species with superior technology or abilities. So, They looked for ways to enhance human capabilities. Enhancement programs are not unusual, Valara said. Many species have tried them. This was different. Project Meridian integrated human consciousness with quantum computing technology. At the neural level, they took volunteers and fundamentally changed how their brains process information. Valara stared at him. What does that mean? It means my mind does not work like a normal human mind anymore. I can process information faster, react faster, solve problems that would take others days in minutes. My thoughts exist partially in quantum superposition, which is why you cannot read them telepathically. There is nothing there for you to read in the traditional sense. How many of you are there? 13. We all volunteered. We all knew the risks. And your government kept this secret? They were terrified of how other species would react. Imagine if the galaxy discovered humans had created enhanced beings with abilities beyond normal limits. It would be seen as an attempt to create super soldiers. The fear alone would have destroyed any chance of peace. Valara felt like the floor was tilting beneath her. Is that why you were chosen for this marriage? To prevent me from reading your thoughts? Partially. The human government knew Corvathian telepaths would try to scan anyone sent to marry you. They could not risk you discovering information that could be used against humanity. So they sent someone you could not read. You were a spy, Valara said, her voice hollow. No, I was protection. Against telepathic manipulation, against political scheming. I was meant to be neutral ground that no one could fully control. Everything has been a lie. Not everything, Daniel said urgently. My reasons for volunteering were real. My desire for peace was real. And my feelings for you are real. Valara laughed bitterly. How can I believe anything you say now? Because I am telling you the truth when I could have kept lying. Because I am trusting you with information that could destroy my people. Because I care about you more than I care about keeping secrets. Before Valara could respond, the station alarms began to blare. Not the warning chimes this time, but the full emergency klaxons. The voice over the communication system was urgent. All personnel to emergency stations. Corvathian fleet detected entering system. Battle configuration. This is not a drill. Valara and Daniel rushed to the command center. The view screens showed 30 Corvathian warships entering normal space, weapons charged. Admiral Morgan was already there, trying to establish communication. Corvathian fleet, this is Haven's Rest. You are entering neutral space. Please state your intentions. The response came cold and clear. This station harbors a traitor to the Corvathian Empire. Princess Valara will be returned to face judgment. The human known as Daniel Price will be executed. You have 1 hour to comply. Valara felt ice in her chest. The hardliners, they have taken control of a battle fleet. Can your mother stop them? Admiral Morgan asked. I do not know. They must have moved in secret. She may not even know this is happening. The command center erupted in controlled chaos. Officers tried to contact the human fleet, but reinforcements were days away. Haven's Rest had minimal defenses. Against 30 warships, they would be destroyed in minutes. Daniel stood perfectly still, staring at the view screen. Valara could see something happening behind his eyes, some calculation she could not follow. There is something else, he said quietly. What? I told you there are 13 of us, Meridian subjects. Yes, we can link together, network our consciousness. It is something we trained for, but never used outside of controlled tests. What could that do? Daniel's expression was troubled. Together we become something more than the sum of our parts. A distributed intelligence that can process information and solve problems at levels approaching quantum computers. In theory, we could hack any system, coordinate any defense, predict outcomes with near certainty. Then do it, Valara said. You do not understand. The power it represents terrifies me. It terrifies all of us. What if we decide not to disconnect? What if we like being that powerful? What if we become something that sees individual humans, individual lives, as insignificant? Valara took his hands. You saved me from an assassin. You have been kind when you could have been cruel. You told me the truth when you could have kept lying. I trust you, Daniel. I trust you not to lose yourself. Valara, please, everyone on this station will die if you do nothing. I will die, and you will have told me the truth for nothing. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. I need somewhere quiet, and I need you to watch me. If something goes wrong, if I do not come back as myself, you need to tell them to shut down my neural implants. I will not let you go, Valara promised. They moved to a small observation room off the command center. Daniel sat on the floor, his back against the wall. Valara sat across from him, close enough to touch. What do I do? She asked. Just be here. Be my anchor to who I am. Daniel closed his eyes. For a moment nothing happened. Then his breathing changed, becoming slower, deeper. His eyes began to move rapidly beneath closed lids. Valara reached out with her telepathic senses and gasped. The silence that usually surrounded Daniel was gone. In its place was something vast and complex, like staring into a star. She could not read thoughts, but she could sense presence, and that presence was growing. One by one, across light years of space, 12 other minds joined Daniel's. Valara felt the moment they connected, like watching a network come online. The presence became enormous, multifaceted, brilliant, and terrible. Through the observation window, she could see the command center. Officers were shouting, pointing at screens. Something was happening. Daniel's eyes snapped open, but they were not focused on her. They were focused on everything and nothing, seeing something beyond normal perception. When he spoke, his voice was his own, but somehow more. Initiating communication infiltration, analyzing fleet command structure, locating origin of orders, cross-referencing Corvathian political database, accessing media networks. Valara watched in awe as screens in the command center began to change. The Corvathian fleet's communication channels were being broadcast in real time. Orders from a rogue military faction, not from the Empress. Proof that this attack was unauthorized. Evidence of conspiracy. The linked minds worked with impossible speed, broadcasting this evidence simultaneously to every ship in the fleet, to the Empress herself, to media outlets across both human and Corvathian space. Within minutes, the fleet commander was receiving new orders from the Empress herself. Stand down immediately. Return to base. Those responsible for the unauthorized attack would face trial. The link dissolved. Daniel's eyes rolled back, and he slumped against the wall. Valara caught him, cradling his head. Daniel, she said urgently. His eyes opened, focused on her face. Did it work? You saved us. You saved everyone. Daniel smiled weakly. Good. I would hate to have revealed my greatest secret for nothing. Rest now, Valara said softly. In a moment. First I need to tell you something. What? I love you, Valara. I have for weeks. I know I have no right to. I know I've kept too many secrets, but I need you to know before everything falls apart. Valara felt tears on her face again, but this time they were not from grief. Everything has already fallen apart. Perhaps now we can build something new. She leaned down and kissed him gently. Daniel's arms came around her, holding her close. Outside, the Corvathian fleet was withdrawing. The immediate danger was over. But the real challenge, Valara knew, was just beginning. The galaxy exploded with reactions to what had happened at Haven's Rest. Within hours, every major news network across dozens of worlds was broadcasting the story. Not just the story of the failed attack, but the revelation that changed everything. Humanity had created enhanced beings. beings with abilities that bordered on the supernatural. Valara sat in their quarters with Daniel, watching the newsfeed scroll past. Her communication device had not stopped chiming since the incident. Messages from her mother, from the Korvathian Council, from representatives of a dozen species, all demanding answers. Daniel looked exhausted. The neural link had taken a toll on him physically. He sat slumped in his chair, dark circles under his eyes, but his expression was calm. "I should have told you sooner," he said quietly. "Perhaps," Valara agreed, "but I understand why you did not. Some secrets are too dangerous to share. And now the secret is out. The galaxy knows what we are." Admiral Morgan arrived an hour later, her face grim. "The Galactic Council has called an emergency session. They want answers about Project Meridian. They want to meet the enhanced humans, and they want to know if humanity poses a threat." "When?" Daniel asked. "Tomorrow. Can you be ready?" "I do not have much choice, do I?" After Morgan left, Valara moved to sit beside Daniel. "What will you tell them?" "The truth. It is all I have left now." "Will the others come? The other Meridian subjects?" Daniel nodded. "They are already on their way. We talked about this possibility years ago. We always knew the secret could not be kept forever." The next day, Valara stood in the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council as a witness. Representatives from 57 species filled the tiered seats, all watching as Daniel and 12 other humans entered the room. Valara had never seen the other Meridian subjects before. They were diverse in appearance, different ages and backgrounds, but they all moved with the same quiet confidence Daniel had. And when she reached out with her telepathy, she felt that same strange silence from each of them. A human woman stepped forward as spokesperson. She was older than Daniel, perhaps 50, with gray streaking her dark hair. Her name was Lisa Cole, and according to her file, she had been the first Meridian volunteer. "Honored representatives," Lisa began, her voice steady, "we understand your concern. We are here to answer your questions honestly." The questions came fast and harsh. What were the limits of their abilities? How many more enhanced humans existed in secret? Could they control minds? Could they disable entire fleets? Were they weapons? Lisa answered each question with patience. "We cannot control minds. We cannot read thoughts. We process information quickly and can network our consciousness. But we are still human, still individuals with free will and moral codes." "You prevented a war yesterday," a Korvathian representative said, "by hacking into our military systems. If you can do that, what prevents you from controlling our governments?" "Ethics," Daniel said, speaking for the first time, "and the knowledge that power without restraint destroys both those who wield it and those it is used against." "Pretty words," a reptilian delegate hissed, "but how can we trust you?" Valara found herself standing, speaking before she thought about the consequences. "You can trust them, because I do." The chamber fell silent. All eyes turned to her. "I am Korvathian," Valara continued. "My people have been at war with humanity for years. I married Daniel Price as part of a peace arrangement. I had every reason to distrust him, to fear him. But I have lived with him for 3 months. I have watched him choose kindness when he could have chosen power. I have seen him protect those who once called him enemy." "He deceived you about what he was," another delegate pointed out. "Yes, and when the truth could no longer be hidden, he told me willingly, knowing it could destroy everything he had worked for. That is not the action of someone seeking dominance. That is the action of someone trying to do what is right." The questioning continued for hours. Finally, the council announced they would deliberate and provide a decision the following day. That night, Valara found Daniel standing in the observation deck again, staring out at the stars. "You did not have to defend me," he said as she approached. "Yes, I did. You defended everyone on this station. The least I could do was speak the truth about who you are." Daniel turned to face her. And who am I, Valara? You are someone trying to be better than the power you have been given. Someone trying to build instead of destroy. Someone I have fallen in love with. Daniel's expression softened. Even knowing what I am? Because of what you are. Not the enhancement, Daniel. The person you choose to be, despite having that enhancement. He pulled her close, and they stood together in the starlight. Valara felt his heart beat against her, steady and real. When she reached out with her telepathy, she still felt that silence where his thoughts should be. But now it did not bother her. She did not need to read his mind to know his heart. The next day, the Galactic Council announced their decision. Project Meridian and all enhanced humans would be registered with the Council. They would be monitored, but allowed to live freely. Their abilities could be called upon in galactic emergencies, but always voluntarily and under strict ethical oversight. Any attempt to create new enhanced beings would require Council approval. It was not perfect, but it was fair. Daniel and the others accepted the terms. But there were still those who were not satisfied. Several species demanded the technology be shared or destroyed. Some wanted the enhanced humans imprisoned. Others wanted them eliminated entirely. A week after the Council decision, Valara received a message that made her blood run cold. An extremist coalition of multiple species was forming. Their goal? Force humanity to either share the enhancement technology or destroy all Meridian subjects. They cannot be serious, Valara said, showing Daniel the message. They are terrified, Daniel replied. Fear makes people irrational. What will you do? Try to find a peaceful solution. Daniel called a press conference. All 13 Meridian subjects stood together before cameras broadcasting to the entire galaxy. I understand your fear, Daniel said, addressing the coalition directly. You look at us and see weapons, threats to our security. But we are not weapons. We are people who made a choice to protect humanity in the only way we could. Lisa Cole stepped forward. You demand we share this technology, but the truth is, we cannot. The neural integration process required specific human brain architecture. Attempting it on other species would be catastrophic. We are not keeping this from you out of selfishness. We are preventing tragedy. Another Meridian subject, a young man named Peter Graham, spoke next. You want us destroyed because you fear what we might become. But the choice to use power responsibly is one each of us makes every day. Judge us by our actions, not your fears. The broadcast ended. The waiting began. Over the following weeks, opinions slowly began to shift. More species came out in support of the Meridian subjects. Academic institutions wanted to study the technology safely. Some governments apologized for their initial harsh reactions. But it was a conversation between Valara and her mother that showed how much had truly changed. I was wrong about the humans, the Empress said via secure communication. And I was wrong about your marriage. I thought it was a sacrifice you were making for peace. I see now it has become something more. It has, Valara agreed. He is a good person, Mother. Enhanced or not, he is someone trying to make the galaxy better. Then you have my blessing, not as Empress, but as your mother. Valara felt tears in her eyes. Thank you. That evening, she and Daniel hosted a small gathering in their quarters. The other Meridian subjects attended, along with Admiral Morgan and several station officers who had become friends. Lisa Cole raised a glass. To surviving the revelation, to building trust, and to the future, whatever it may hold. Everyone echoed the toast. Valara caught Daniel's eye across the room and smiled. He smiled back, and in that moment, she knew everything would be all right. Later, when the guests had left, and they were alone, Daniel took Valara's hands. I have something to ask you, he said. What is it? We married for politics, for peace, for duty, but now I want to ask you something different. He knelt before her, holding both her hands in his. Valara coughed. Will you marry me again? Not for the galaxy, not for our peoples, but for us? Valara felt joy flood through her. Yes, 1,000 times yes. They kissed, and Valara finally understood what it meant to be truly connected to someone. Not through telepathy, not through shared thoughts, but through choice, through trust, through love freely given. Outside their window, ships from dozens of species docked at Haven's Rest. Representatives coming to negotiate, to learn, to build something new together. The war was truly over, not ended by force or fear, but by two people who chose to see beyond species and find humanity in each other. And in doing so, they had shown the galaxy that peace was not just possible, it was worth fighting for. 6 months after the revelation of Project Meridian, Valara stood in the newly expanded conference hall of Haven's Rest and barely recognized the station she had first arrived at. Where once there had been empty corridors and minimal staff, now hundreds of representatives from across the galaxy worked and lived together. The station had grown, adding 3 new sections to accommodate the influx of diplomats, scientists, and cultural ambassadors. What began as a symbol of peace between two species had become something greater, a true embassy for the entire galaxy. Daniel found her standing at one of the new observation windows, watching construction drones add another docking ring to the station. "Nervous about tonight?" he asked, sliding his arm around her waist. "Terrified," Valara admitted. Tonight was their second wedding, the private one, just for themselves and the people they cared about. No media, no political representatives, no pressure to perform for the watching galaxy. Just two people making a real commitment to each other. "You could still change your mind," Daniel said with a slight smile. "Could you?" "Not even if the galaxy depended on it." Valara leaned into him, still marveling at how natural this felt, how right. "Do you remember when we first met, how awkward everything was? I remember thinking you were the most beautiful person I had ever seen, and being absolutely certain you would hate me. I was terrified of you, of all humans. I thought you would be violent, crude, impossible to understand. And now? Now I know you are violent when necessary, occasionally crude when you think I am not listening, and still impossible to understand. But I love you anyway." Daniel laughed, the sound warm and genuine. It was a sound Valara had heard more and more often as the months passed. As he relaxed into being himself instead of being careful. The past 6 months had been challenging in ways neither of them expected. The revelation of the Meridian Project had caused upheaval across multiple governments. Some species demanded sanctions against humanity. Others wanted access to the technology, refusing to believe it could not be shared safely. It was Lisa Cole who finally resolved the issue. She proposed creating a research consortium where scientists from multiple species could study the Meridian technology together. Not to replicate it, but to understand it. To see if the principles could be adapted safely for other species, or if they were truly human-specific. The proposal was accepted. The research station was being built now, in orbit around a neutral world. Lisa would lead the project, working with the best minds from 17 different species. But it was Daniel's testimony before the Galactic Senate that truly shifted public opinion. Valara had watched him stand before the assembled representatives, speaking with quiet conviction. "You look at us and see power. But power is not good or evil. It simply is. What matters is how we choose to use it. Every species here has abilities that could be used to harm others. Telepathy could manipulate. Advanced technology could destroy. Physical strength could oppress. But you do not, because you have built societies based on ethics and law. We ask only for the same chance. Judge us by our choices, not your fears." The vote was close, but it passed. The Meridian subjects would be integrated into galactic society, registered and monitored, but free to live their lives. Several had already found new purposes. Peter Graham was working with the research consortium. Another subject, Helen Santos, was teaching at a multi-species university. Daniel had been offered a position designing new station systems that could better accommodate different species' needs. The conspiracy that had sent the Corvathian fleet to attack Haven's Rest was fully exposed. 3 high-ranking military officers and 2 council members were tried and convicted. The Empress herself had apologized publicly, admitting the rot within her own government. But perhaps the most unexpected change came from an unlikely source. A young Corvathian scientist named Kren had approached Velara with a fascinating proposal. "I have been studying human literature about your marriage," Kren said, his mental voice bright with enthusiasm. "The mixed marriage phenomenon. On your world, it created social change, helped break down barriers between groups. Perhaps it could do the same for us." "Are you suggesting more interspecies marriages?" Velara asked. "Not suggesting. I am planning. I have fallen in love with a human scientist at the research consortium. We wish to marry. I wanted your advice on how to navigate the cultural challenges." Velara had spent 3 hours talking with Kren, sharing what she had learned about bridging 2 very different worlds. It was strange and wonderful to realize she had become an expert on something she had stumbled into herself. Now, as evening approached and the time for their private ceremony drew near, Velara felt a contentment she had never imagined possible. The ceremony took place in the observation deck that had become their special place. The same deck where they had first really talked, where they had stood together during the crisis, where Daniel had proposed the second time. Admiral Morgan attended, along with Lisa Cole and 3 other Meridian subjects. Several station officers who had become friends, Kren and his human partner, and via holographic projection, Velara's mother, the Empress. Velara wore traditional Corvathian wedding robes again, but this time in colors she chose herself, blue and silver instead of violet, representing unity between worlds. Daniel wore civilian clothes for the first time since she had met him. Simple, but elegant. They had written their own vows. Velara spoke first. "Daniel Price, when we first married, I saw only duty. I saw the end of a war and the beginning of an arrangement. I did not see you. But slowly, day by day, you showed me who you really were. Not with grand gestures, but with small kindnesses, with patience, with the courage to be vulnerable, even when it terrified you. You taught me that love is not about reading someone's mind. It is about choosing to trust them with your heart. I love you, not despite the secrets you kept, but because of who you revealed yourself to be. And I choose you, today and always." Daniel's voice was rough with emotion when he spoke. "Velara Koth, I was lost when I met you. Lost in guilt, in grief, in the weight of being something other than fully human. I volunteered for our marriage because I wanted to believe peace was possible. But I did not believe happiness was possible, not for me. You proved me wrong. You looked at someone who was part machine, part quantum computing, and you saw a person. You loved me even when you did not understand me. You defended me when the galaxy wanted to fear me. You gave me something I thought I had lost when I became Meridian. You gave me hope. I love you with everything I am, enhanced abilities and human heart alike. And I choose you, today and always." There was no ceremonial blade this time, no blood exchange. Instead, they simply joined hands and spoke the words that bound them. "By choice, we are united. By love, we are made whole. By hope, we face the future together." When they kissed, their friends erupted in applause. The Empress, watching via hologram, smiled with genuine warmth. The celebration afterward was joyful and relaxed. People from different species mixing freely, sharing food and stories. Admiral Morgan cornered Daniel at one point. "I have a proposal for you," she said. "I am already married, Admiral," Daniel replied with a grin. Morgan laughed. "Not that kind of proposal. The human government wants to create a new position, an ambassador for enhanced human affairs. someone to represent Meridian interests, but also to serve as a bridge between our people and the rest of the galaxy. I recommended you. Daniel glanced at Valara across the room. I would need to discuss it with my wife. But think about it. You helped create this piece. You could help maintain it. Later, when the guests had departed and they were finally alone, Daniel told Valara about the offer. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think it sounds perfect for you, if it is what you want. What I want is to build a life with you. Everything else is secondary." Valara smiled. "Then we will build it together. Ambassador Daniel Price has a nice sound to it, and Princess Valara can be your diplomatic partner." "You would do that? Give up your position on the homeworld?" "I am not giving up anything. I am choosing something better. Besides, my mother has been encouraging me to take a more active role in interspecies relations. Apparently, our marriage has made me an expert." They moved to their bedroom, which Valara had decorated with elements from both their cultures. Korvath, Thion light crystals that changed color based on mood, hung alongside human photographs of Earth landscapes. The bed was large enough for Daniel's height, but covered in the soft fabrics Valara preferred. As they lay together in the darkness, Valara spoke softly. "Daniel, there is something I have been meaning to ask you." "What is it?" "When you link with the other Meridian subjects, when you become that greater intelligence, what is it like?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. "It is difficult to describe. Imagine if your thoughts could stretch across light years. If you could hold a dozen complex problems in your mind simultaneously and solve them all at once. If you could see patterns in data that would take normal consciousness months to recognize." "Does it frighten you?" "Yes, because it would be so easy to stay linked, to remain in that state of expanded awareness. Sometimes I worry that one day we will link and decide that individual existence is too limiting, that we will choose to stay merged. But you have not. No, because every time we link, I think of you. I think of your voice, your laugh, the way you look when you are concentrating on diplomatic reports. I think of all the small, human moments that make life worth living. And I choose to come back. I always choose to come back." Valara reached out with her telepathy, touching that familiar silence where his thoughts existed in quantum superposition. "I cannot read your mind, Daniel. I will never know your thoughts the way I can with my own people. But I do not need to. Your actions speak louder than any thought could." "Valara," Daniel said softly, "there is something I have never tried before, something I was not sure I could do." "What?" "When I am linked with the others, we share everything, thoughts, feelings, experiences. But I have never tried to share with someone outside the link, someone not enhanced." Valara's breath caught. "Is it possible?" "I do not know, but I would like to try, if you are willing." "What would I need to do?" "Just reach out with your telepathy. Touch my mind the way you normally would, and I will try to meet you there." Valara closed her eyes and extended her telepathic senses. She touched the edge of Daniel's consciousness, that familiar quiet void. But this time, she felt something shift, like a door opening. Suddenly, she was flooded with sensation. Not thoughts exactly, but impressions, emotions, memories. She felt Daniel's love for her, vast and deep and overwhelming. She felt his fear the first time they met, his wonder as he got to know her, his joy when she said she loved him. She felt his guilt over the secrets he kept, and his relief when the truth finally came out. She felt his experience of linking with the other Meridian subjects, the vast expansion of consciousness, the terrifying beauty of seeing the universe through multiple perspectives at once. And threading through it all, his determination to remain himself, to not lose his humanity in the pursuit of greater power. The connection lasted only seconds before Daniel gently withdrew. But those seconds showed Valara more than months of conversation could have. She could not find words. "I know," Daniel said, pulling her close. "I know." They held each other in silence, two beings from different species who had found a way to truly understand each other. Not through telepathy or enhancement, but through choice, through vulnerability, through love. Outside their window, the galaxy turned. Ships from dozens of worlds came and went from Haven's Rest. Scientists worked on the Meridian Research Project. Diplomats negotiated new treaties. Young people from different species met and fell in love, inspired by Valara and Daniel's example. The war between Corvathians and humans was over. But more than that, something new was beginning. A future where differences were celebrated instead of feared, where power was tempered by wisdom, where love could bridge any distance. It had started with an arranged marriage between two people who had every reason to hate each other. It had grown into something neither of them could have imagined. A partnership, a love story, a symbol of hope for an entire galaxy. And as Valara drifted off to sleep in Daniel's arms, she knew that whatever challenges came next, they would face them together. Not as Corvathian and human, not as princess and enhanced being, but as partners, as two people who chose each other every day in a galaxy full of infinite possibilities. The future was uncertain, but it was theirs to build, and that was enough.